will call. Perfect. Thank you. We will call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. on September 9th, 2021. Before we jump into the agenda, does the general manager have any opening comments that he'd like to make?
Yes, thank you, President Akbari, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this board meeting. My name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this public meeting either by using the Zoom application or by telephone. If you're participating via Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comments. In Zoom, you'll be able to view presentation materials as they're presented to the board. At any time, you may submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom app, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. If you're participating via telephone audio, again, we ask that you put your phone on mute. You may view the meeting agenda and the presentation materials, which have all been posted to the district's website at www.acwd.org, and you can follow along that way. This Zoom webinar is being recorded and will be made accessible to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you all for attending, and that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We'll move on to item 1 in the agenda. Roll call, please.
Yes, Directors Weed.
Here.
Gunther.
Here.
Huang.
Here.
Sethi.
Here.
And Akbari.
Here. Director Huang, will you lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Huang. We'll move on to item 3, public comments. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment on this at this time? And you can raise your hand in the Zoom app, or you can get our attention through the chat feature. I am not seeing any hands raised in the Zoom app. Can the district secretary confirm that we don't have anyone in the chat who wishes to speak?
That's correct.
President Akbari, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was having trouble switching from
no
one
problem.
meeting to another. So I do have one comment, which is not on the agenda. Directors of the Alameda County Water District, I had the opportunity to tour East Bay Regional Park District's new Dumbarton Quarry campground. I could not help but notice the thousands of square feet of brand new manicured lawn, which of course requires ample irrigation, that had been installed during what could be California's worst drought. Drought-tolerant landscaping could have been installed in its place. While the responsibility for this poor choice lies solely with East Bay Regional Park District, I do believe ACWD has a role to play in working with the Park District to prevent such blunders in the future. Perhaps the fact that the Park District pays virtually nothing for their water influences their decision-making process. For those directors who implore the district to utilize good business practices, purchasing San Francisco PUC water at nearly $2,000 an acre foot and then turning around and selling it to the Park District for $8 an acre foot sounds like a loser to me. In addition to the fiscal impact, decisions such as this make it much more difficult for the district to meet the water conservation mandates, which are likely to come down from the state of California. How many landscape rebates are required to undo this debacle? Again, the fault lies solely with the Park District. The choice for this board is whether you will sit by silently. Thank you.
President Akbari, I can just add a little bit to that if it's okay with,
Absolutely.
with you.
Yes.
I appreciate the comment, and staff noticed that as well, of course. And we are reaching out to East Bay Regional Park District with regard to ways of helping to minimize their water use, given that it's a severe drought that we're living in today. Just also wanted to mention that the water pricing that was mentioned is a little off. And so East Bay Parks would be paying a hefty sum for irrigation of that lawn area. And so that's another reason why we're reaching out to the Park District to help them make sure that they're using their water budget efficiently.
Mr. Stevenson, a question from Director Sethi.
Yes.
Aren't they paying something closer to $450 an acre foot?
Well, one of the things we're looking into is whether they're using groundwater for any part of that, or if it's all on their potable water irrigation meter. And of course, that's all on the private side. So we need to work with each East Bay Regional Park District to confirm. If it's groundwater, it's less than the potable water rate, of course. But if it's potable, then it's the same rate that everybody else pays. So it's definitely more than the $8 per acre foot.
Well, I hope we can create a savings for them by guiding them in the right direction. But the $8 a square foot that Mr. Nishimura cites is specifically for our cities in the Tri-City area.
That's correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura, for the comment. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the board at this time? Hearing none and seeing no hands raised in the Zoom app, we will move on to item 4, consent calendar. Do any directors wish to amend the consent calendar?
I'll move that we amend it by adding item 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7 to the consent calendar this evening.
I will make a request that we remove item 5.5 from consent.
Okay, I'll change that to everything but 5.5. So 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7.
And I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Directors Wade?
Aye.
Oh, Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move.
I'll move such.
I'll second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Directors Wade?
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.5, I will be recusing myself due to a real property interest that falls within 1,000 feet of the proposed project. And so I'm going to ask our district secretary to move me into our waiting room if possible.
Yes, we'll do that.
And I think the honor then would fall to Vice President Weed to move this item forward.
So for item 5.5, which is the resolution accepting completion of the Canyon Heights Booster Station upgrade project, is there a staff report related to that?
Staff is prepared to provide a summary of the item, or
I think a summary would probably be the best as opposed to a detailed report, and then because it was on the consent calendar.
Sure. So to provide a brief summary, I'll turn it over to our interim Director of Engineering and Technology, Ms. Reika Ibagunta.
Yes, good evening, members of the board and members of the public. Provide a brief summary of resolution accepting completion of the Canyon Heights Booster Station upgrade project. The board previously awarded construction of the Canyon Heights Booster Station project to Valentin Corporation. The project included replacement of existing electrical and control system equipment within the existing pump station and made improvements to site safety and facility access. The project is now complete and the station has been placed into service. This project was reviewed with the Engineering and Technology Committee on July 28, 2021. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
I have some comments. Director Sethi here.
Yes, are there any public comments on this item? There being none, I bring it to the board to see if there are any board comments.
Yes, from Director Sethi here. So I had a chance to visit the completed work site 2 days ago, and it looks very good. In our engineering committee meeting, I did express that I would like to see some new landscaping around that corner by the railroad and viewing into the neighborhood. I'd expressed this opinion at a previous board meeting too. And I met with Mr. Stevenson yesterday on a number of things, including this item. And I believe that while we have 2 really nice shade trees on the rear part of our small parcel there, we probably need to take out the hard compacted soil, maybe 2 or 3 feet deep, and be able to put in some appropriate landscaping. And I was even thinking of like crepe myrtle on the backside for color, oleander, maybe in the front, which flowers and reaches a nice height that obscures the pump station there. And lastly, there's a median between the sidewalk and the street with uncovered soil, nothing planted in it, that may be part of the city, or it may be part of our property. I'm not sure, but it would be nice to see that median also planted appropriately with drought tolerant vegetation. So thank you very much for allowing me to provide my input.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Let me follow briefly with a comment on Director Sethi's note, talking about oleanders. The ability to plant non-irrigated landscaping on throughout the community, I think particularly on commercial properties, is something I would encourage us to work with the local cities on as well, and modify the city requirements that all commercial landscaping be irrigated. And I can give you an example of a city-owned parking lot next to a building I own in Mission San Jose, which does not have irrigation, never did. So that is one of the, why it never has gotten traction is beyond me, but the city has examples where they've been able to put in landscaping for parking lots, et cetera, that did not have irrigation. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you for those comments. And certainly with regard to some vegetation around the Canyon Heights Booster Station, that was also a comment that we'd received from the public when we had done our original public outreach meetings associated with the project. That work wasn't included within the construction contract, but we are looking at ways of trying to screen that site a little bit visually. And so that is something that we're working on moving forward. I did want to also add that staff's recommendation related to this item is by motion, grant a time extension of 49 calendar days and adopt a resolution accepting completion of the Canyon Heights Booster Station Upgrade Project, Job 21267.
I will move the staff recommendation.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. Since we're on, I believe we need a roll call because we're on video.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
and Sethi.
Aye.
So we can invite Director Akbari back to the group.
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Akbari. Welcome back. And item 5.5 did pass.
Wonderful.
4-0.
Thank you, Vice President Weed. So with that, we'll move on to item 5.8, water supply assessment for the station district specific plan project. And I will turn it to our general manager for this item.
Thank you, President Akbari, and I will in turn turn this over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Laura Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The City of Union City has requested a water supply assessment, or also known as a WSA, for the Station District Specific Plan Project pursuant to California Water Code Section 10910. The future water demand of the project is consistent with the district's forecast of future water demands and is included in current water supply planning assumptions. This item was reviewed with the Water Resources and Conservation Committee on July 28th, 2021. A final draft copy of the full WSA was included in the board packet for the board and public to review as needed. Approval of this item is consistent with Strategic Plan Goal 2, sustain a reliable, high-quality water supply for district customers. So tonight's recommendation is by motion, approve the September 2021 water supply assessment for the Station District Specific Plan Project and authorize the general manager to submit the September 2021 water supply assessment for the Station District Specific Plan Project to the City of Union City. And we're happy to answer questions on that item.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the board?
I have a question, John.
Mhm.
At one time, Union City was proposing 22-story buildings in the vicinity of the Union City BART station. Does the water supply agreement identify an elevation of service that they're asking us to deliver the water to?
That's a good question. I don't know that there's 22-story buildings included in this particular plan. I do know that we have Thomas Nizer on the line today to answer questions, and he may know some of the history on that, Director Weed. And this, just as a reminder, this isn't yet the water service agreement for the project, but just simply the water supply assessment that we would be able to provide the water. So Mr. Nizer, are you there and with any comments on that?
I actually don't know the heights for the proposed construction. It's a pretty large area, but the numbers are probably more in that 5-story range. But it is true at one time, City of Union City had plans for 20-story residential housing near the BART facility. But I don't think that's the case anymore. It's a little bit beyond the WSA doesn't get into that kind of information. It's simply how many housing units, how many people, how many square footage of non-residential building space.
Something to keep an eye out for. The City of Union City was playing games with their redevelopment agency and sold something like 17 parcels at $1 per parcel. And in transit, just as redevelopment was going away, it was one of the firm Myers Nave led the lead in the lawsuit against the redevelopment agency at the state level, the state of California, for eliminating redevelopment agencies. So it, in the end, the state won hands down. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Are there any other members of the board who wish to make a comment or ask a question on this item? Hearing none, I will open it up to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question on this item? Hearing none again, I will turn it to the board, see if there's a motion.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Sethi. Director Sethi,
I'm sorry, I had myself on mute. Aye, but I had a question first.
Oh, yes, Director Sethi, I apologize.
How much water are we talking about annually here in acre feet for this development?
Good question. The project area has an estimated water demand of 955 acre feet per year.
That's a substantial amount when we're averaging somewhere close to 40,000 acre feet a year. That's adding 5% to our water supply. And so I would just ask of staff, are we absolutely sure that we can provide this amount of water?
It is included in our planning, and so we are confident about that, and I will ask Mr. Nizer to elaborate too.
Certainly, that's correct. And Laura, I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, but could you double check? I think the 900 is the existing plus the expansion, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll double check that, but I gotta take my glasses off. Sorry, hang on.
All right. But in the meantime, Director Sethi, the point is that these numbers were already in our water demand forecast. And so the demands which were included in our urban plan and adopted by this board already includes this housing. So it's not on top of the supply reliability and the modeling data that this board has seen, the level of service anticipated into the future when considering other development, ongoing conservation, and also changes in our available supplies. So it's included in all of that reliability data that's in the urban plan that we just adopted.
And how many housing units are we talking about here?
I've got that in front of me too. It's an increase of 2,520 housing units and 3,173,000 square feet of non-residential business space within the project area. And I did confirm that the estimated water demand of the 955 is the build out demand.
And that covers both residential and commercial?
Yes.
And when is Union City expecting that this development will be completed?
So this is really a specific plan. So it's basically a big rezoning project, and the development will happen over time. There'll be multiple individual developers coming in and tackling this. It's not an actual sort of project that's going to sort of break ground at any specific time. So it just kind of goes along with our standard assumptions of growth that are worked into our demand forecast.
Well, I'm going to vote yes here, but I will, excuse me, also at the same time express that there's a lot of concern in the community while we're in a drought, where we're adding in major development projects, and people are wondering where the water's coming from when we're running out of water. And so to the extent that we can communicate out to our Tri-City area residents, you know, what is going on and how we are able to meet this future demand in terms of development over the next couple of decades, I think that's very important for staff to recognize.
Certainly understood. In fact, we have FAQs on this, frankly, from the previous drought. It's a very logical question. It's a hard one to get one's arms around when explaining to the public how long-term planning works. And the main thing that we like to reemphasize is that you know, planning such as this is long-term. It's not this year. This demand for water won't start this year. It happens over time and is already included in the planning which has been done to date.
Well, if I remember correctly, this is more than, or maybe twice the water supply that was planned for the Patterson development in North Fremont. So it is a very substantial amount of water.
Yeah. Now, there's a key difference there. Thank you for asking about that. The Patterson Ranch was never zoned for development. So when we talk about included in our planning, we take account for all of the identified lands for development that are zoned for development with the cities. And we consider what type of zoning they have, and we project the amount of housing and non-residential development will occur, and we relate that into demand for water. Patterson Ranch was not zoned for development, so therefore it was not included in our planning. So every unit of new demand that came along with that development was additive. It was on top of our existing totals that were in our urban plan. So it's categorically outside. In fact, it's the very reason that the water supply assessment show me the water laws were passed in the first place, was to ensure that developers can't just build in areas that haven't been identified for development and haven't been properly planned for in water supply planning.
Dr. Sethi, do you have any additional question there? I had.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
If we look at the Patterson on the north side of 84, the city of Fremont has changed the zoning criteria to 110 feet for elevations, looking for high-rise apartment structures, with Facebook being the primary developer, in the, so it's not really impacted by normal economic conditions. They put in a 300 and some child care center for Facebook employees. That's a major community. Is that any part of our water supply agreement analysis or planning currently? I know we're getting off to a different topic, but a different project.
I'm not familiar. Where is the project again? Is this a proposed?
The zoning along the industrial area, currently industrially zoned properties of the Pierre Aguilar family on the north side of 84. Several years ago, the city increased the height limit to 110 feet. Now, you're not going to get industrial buildings that are 10 stories high, 10, 11 stories. That's for residential for Facebook in the next community. Has that ever gone through a water supply assessment?
I'm gonna jump in real quick because I know we're talking about a totally separate project. I'm gonna kind of look to our district council to see if it's appropriate for us to have that discussion right now.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I had unmuted myself because it sounded like we were getting off of the water supply assessment for the Union City project and going on to something else. It's okay for Director Weed to bring something like this up under director's comments later on the agenda and ask that the item be agendized, but this is not the time to bring it up. So thank you for asking.
No, thank you for that clarification. The next question I have, which is on the project. If there is a modification, because 3 million square feet of non-residential is not the current pattern of development in the community. We look at the 1,600 units going into New Park Mall, residential units, the conversion of the hub to residential. It seems to me to be somewhat fanciful, and the real future might be a change. At what point in how much leeway do they have in this specific plan before they trigger another water supply assessment?
That's a great question. So the general direction is for higher density around transportation hubs, as we've been seeing for the past 2 decades now. And this mixed use development, the sense is to have retail as well as employment centers and housing all co-located. What really transpires, sometimes it goes purely to housing. We've seen that happen on several occasions. If there is a substantive change in the plans, they will submit that information to us and we will check the water demand for that. And if we find it consistent with the water demands that were determined in our WSA, within the reasonable range, then we just sort of consider it to be sufficiently covered with this WSA. If it were to change, we treat it sort of like a new project and we would look at that increment. And if it has enough threshold, which can be to trigger a WSA, we would actually do a second WSA for that development. And those triggers are thresholds of housing, non-residential square footage, or water demand. Any one of those can trigger a need to do an additional water supply assessment.
Okay. I'll save the director's comments about some of the changes in development that we've seen recently with our local cities.
I'd just like to make a quick comment. I've driven up where a lot of this development is over there in the back by the BART station. And there is a fair amount of construction and development, just like they're saying. The ground floors are commercial. It's interesting. It doesn't really, it's something kind of new over in there. I'm surprised. I think they're probably going to try to hold to it. There's a lot of room over there, a lot of industry businesses that are going to be converting, basically. Not sure exactly what they are, warehouse, etc. But Yeah, it's true. They really do have ground floor mixed use.
I may suggest that they have a lot of ground floor vacancies on the projects, whether it be Capitol Avenue or Fremont.
Right now, they seem to have it over there. So I'm just saying.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment here, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I'm a longtime member of the Fremont Chamber of Commerce, most of my adult life, and one of the big concerns at the chamber is the misguided direction of city planners in our Tri-City area and city council members in doing these mixed use developments, because there are such high rates of vacancy. It's unbelievable. And it's very poor planning, in my opinion. But again, I seconded this agenda item and will support it in lieu of, you have to leave these things to our city officials.
Thank you for all of those comments. I see we have a comment from a member of the public, Mr. Ken N.
Thank you, Director. President Akbari. This discussion sort of piqued a question in my mind. I mean, I think Mr. Nizer pointed out that the district includes in their planning properties or areas of land that have been zoned by the city for residential, and those areas are, I guess, assumed to be eventually developed and therefore are baked into the plan. I'm curious, what density is being assumed for that forward planning, and are the cities putting in higher density housing? That is, I mean, are we underestimating the water demand? So maybe the specific question is, this 955 acre feet that is being asked for in this water supply assessment, was that on target with what was in the plan, or is it a figure that was higher or lower?
I'll let Ms. Heides or Mr. Nizer confirm, but it's my understanding that the specific plan itself is what our water supply assessment is based upon. So it's exactly in line with the city's planning. It is high density, but as Mr. Nizer pointed out, that is the trend, and the land use planners are the cities, and they are more and more looking to move that higher density development adjacent to transit centers, and this is a key, of course, regional transit center. So I know that this has been in the works with the city of Union City for many years. Director Weed mentioned a 22-story building, and that was indeed part of the plan many years ago. That has, I think, been replaced by somewhat lower density and certainly lower height construction. But again, this is really what we're reacting to is the proposal by the city to confirm this specific plan for this area. We've reviewed our planning relative to the proposed specific plan and found that it's consistent with our overall water supply planning. And so that's what's reflected in our water supply assessment.
I need to ask a point of order here from Ms. Marquew. You were taking roll call when I was on mute, and I want to know if we have a proper vote here on this item.
I was going to continue to take the roll call because President Akbari hasn't voted yet.
Do we need to start the motion and roll call over, or can we just pick up where we left off?
You can pick up where you left off. Maybe Ms. Marcoux can remind everybody where we are in the vote and who has already voted.
So Director Gunther made the motion, Director Huang seconded it, and I had got 4 ayes so far from the 4 directors, and I just need President Akbari's vote.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for those questions and comments on that item. We'll move on to our next item, and I believe, unless staff corrects me, that we'll be taking items 5.9 and 5.10 together. That is item 5.9, the authorization to execute a power purchase agreement for the Clean Energy Program, and item 5.10, authorization of amendment to the professional services agreement for the Clean Energy Program implementation. And I'll turn it to our general manager, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, President Akbari. Indeed, we'll be presenting on both of these items together. They're very much intertwined and related. And I will say that we are absolutely thrilled to be bringing these items to the board this evening at long last. These items represent a significant milestone in this program and the district's implementation of clean, renewable energy, significant savings in operational costs, and enhancements in the sustainable operation of our facilities. Ms. Ibagunta will introduce members of the project team who will be presenting this topic, but I also wanted to recognize the significant efforts of other staff and others involved in the project, including Dan Stevenson, our facilities maintenance manager, and his team from the district's operations and maintenance department, Mr. Sidney Ohm, financial analysis supervisor from the finance department, and assistance from ACWD's retired senior electrical engineer, Greg Watson, who helped to move this program forward following the loss of our project manager last year. I also wanted to recognize the outstanding efforts of your general counsel and his team, who have been really instrumental in not only the procurement process you'll hear about, but importantly, the process of negotiating the complex power purchase agreements, which got us over the finish line to where we are this evening. Finally, I wanted to call the board's attention to some of our attendees this evening. Jonathan Hitchborn is the project director for Next Era Energy Resources, which, spoiler alert, was the highest ranked solar developer in our procurement process that the board will hear more about this evening. And Jonathan has been working with his team for over a year now on this program. And then last, but certainly not least, is Rachel Defranco, who's the sustainability manager with the city of Fremont. And Rachel was very helpful early in our program as we developed the overall approach, as she shared her experiences with the city's own aggressive solar program and provided pointers and lessons learned that could help inform our own program. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Defranco, and I believe she'll be interested in making some remarks following staff's presentation this evening. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Interim Director of Engineering and Technology, Ms. Reika Ibagunta.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And good evening again, everyone. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself and the presenters. My name is Reika Ibagunta. I'm the Project Engineering Manager and the Interim Director of Engineering. From the, Ms. Marco, would you mind going to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So from the ACWD team, we have Carlos Samperev, who is the project manager through the implementation phase. We have Shane Oneski. He has been a core team member of the program. Shane completed early analysis studies and assisted in the development of RFP and solar developer PPA. So from our consulting partner, Sage Renewable Energy Consulting, Elon Fuzz from Sage will be presenting. We have Jonathan Hitchborn from Next Era also in the audience. Next slide, please. So here is the agenda for today's discussion. We have about 4 main sections. First, I'll provide a brief overview of the program. Mr. Fuzz will then go over the highlights of the power purchase agreements, including the procurement process and financial projections. Mr. Oneski will go over the proposed solar implementation plan at various district facilities. And Mr. Sampere will wrap up the presentation with our approach for public outreach and the implementation milestones. At the end of the presentation, we are requesting the board to take action on 2 items. one related to the authorization to execute power purchase agreements for clean energy program, and then the second one related to the authorization of amendment to professional services agreement for clean energy program implementation. Next slide, please. Okay, so the clean energy program objectives are in alignment with the district's mission to be a good steward of the environment and provide service at a reasonable price. So one of the main goals of the program is to generate large-scale clean renewable energy. To put this in perspective, the program would increase the total solar power generation in the entire city of Fremont by 10%. Considering just the non-residential usage, this is going to be around 23% increase in solar power consumption. The program is expected to reduce carbon emissions by over 2,500 tons annually. This program will also help reduce operating costs by $20 million over 25 years and also protect the district from future energy rate inflation. Another key objective is to minimize impact on core operations during construction and operations of this program. Next slide, please. So here are a few highlights of the program. We are going to install solar photovoltaic cells at select district facilities. I'll cover them in the next slide in terms of the locations. We are proposing to use PPA agreements to leverage tax credits, investment tax credits, and also accelerated depreciation. The sites were carefully selected to maximize the benefits. We are pursuing energy generation using two distinct mechanisms. One, use of PG&E, Renewable Energy Self-Generation Bill Credit Transfer Program, generally referred to as RES-BCT program. And this is intended to, this is sized to maximize the benefit of our power generation to export to different facilities within the district. And the second mechanism is the net energy metering. This is to maximize energy use on site. Next slide, please. So the program consists of different phases. The planning, feasibility, and modeling phase has been completed in 2019. The plan assessed multiple clean and renewable energy generation alternatives and prepared life cycle net present value at that time. So today's request for board action signifies the completion of this important milestone, PPA procurement and contracting. My sincere thanks to everyone who are involved in making this happen. So once we get the board's approval for contract execution, we'll go ahead with phase 1 implementation at Whitfield Reservoir, Mayfield Reservoir headquarters, and Newark desalination facility. So 3 of the 4 facilities for phase 1 are in city of Fremont. And with that background, I will turn it over to Mr. Fuss for from Sage Renewables Energy. Sage Energy Renewables, and he will be covering the PPA procurement process. And I would like to mention that during the transitions, we'll take a quick pause for any questions. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take these questions. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fuzz.
I have some questions. If other directors do, as I'll wait for them. That's John Weed. You mentioned $20 million. What percentage savings is that on our total over 20 years?
We do have the financial information in the next slides, Director Reed, so that would be captured in the following slides when Mr. Fuzz would go over the financial projections for the project.
Okay, so you'll be giving the specifics on what the cost per, the actual cost per kilowatt hour that we're looking at, and what the projected are.
The weighted average will be provided, correct.
All right. The next is a general comment that while solar has its advantages, it does not provide, it has limited the benefit for contingency operations unless we put in either batteries or also have natural gas that we can convert to electricity through fuel cells. This plan does not. So we're open to additional contingency related projects for contingency operations should we lose the grid and have to go on to a local energy supply, correct?
That is certainly a consideration when we looked into solar installations for this project. But I would, if Mr. Oneski has anything else to add to this, I would appreciate if you could chime in.
Yeah, and I'll just add too that this is really focused on routine operation. It certainly does not preclude the use of battery or other power generation approaches with regard to contingency operations. And in fact, one of the key things we wanted to ensure was that if battery storage ever became more economical and advantageous to the district for routine operations, or if we wanted to implement battery storage as part of our contingency operations, that we could do that. And so this does not preclude us from doing any of those things.
Okay, and this will probably relate to the next slide when we get into the specifics. But I was disappointed that on this was presented to us, we were told that natural gas was 14 cents per kilowatt hour suggestion. And yet I've had input from Bloom Energy where they claim they have it at 9 cents per kilowatt hour for natural gas 24/7 power backup. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Director Wade.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board or members of the public?
From a board member, but I'll let the public go first.
I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand. Director Sethi, the floor is yours.
Okay, so just to buttress what Director Weed was saying, it's been, I believe, 10 years since I first introduced the district to Bloom Energy when they were first getting off the ground. I was involved in the venture capital opportunity on that company. And our state senator at that time, Assembly Member Bob Wykowski, and I were able to meet with the founders and tour the facilities where they started up. And I have been a long proponent of their technology and similar technologies. I'm not advocating a single company here, but from a startup 10 years ago, they have gone public and they are valued at a multi-billion-dollar capitalization now. From 10 years ago when they were nothing. And Kaiser hospitals, all Google, Facebook, all of the major corporations around the Bay Area are using Bloom technology as their backup. All you have to do is go to their corporate website and you can see all of the accounts that they have right now. And I would encourage us that along with the installation of solar, that eventually we have to have some sustainable microgrid that's independent of PG&E. And one way to do that is to go with fuel cells or backup batteries. I was mentioning to Mr. Stevenson yesterday, you know, the portable roll-on wheel Tesla battery installations that you can put in to our pump stations, you know, which are below ground or at grade. We can put these into our desal plant, or we can supplement the desal plant with fuel cells or Tesla type batteries. Again, I'm not promoting any one vendor. There's a lot of competition in the Tesla battery market. But these are things we need to take a look at in the future. And under director's comments, I was going to talk about one of the sessions I attended at the CSDA conference last week, where they were talking about exactly these type of things. I'll get into more detail on that later. Second, just to put some perspective here on what we're may be approving here tonight, it was 3 years ago this fall that I first proposed putting together a set of community workshops to put together a clean energy program. And here we are 3 years later. It's taken a lot of hard work on the part of our staff and the contractor that we have engaged with to get to this point. And then we have the rollout, which will take some time as well. But I see this as the beginning or midpoint of a long-term program to achieve the state requirements for 60% elimination of or have a carbon footprint that's 60% reduced by 2030 and zero carbon footprint by 2045. These are ambitious schedules, and I'm really proud of our district that we will be 10% of all the solar in Fremont on the residential side, 25% or close to that on the commercial industrial side. This is quite an achievement for our district. Lastly, and I brought this up at previous meetings, I am a little disappointed that we're not taking advantage of the Patterson Reservoir site and the available real estate footprint that's available over there. And I just want to throw out this idea that I have not mentioned, but was thinking about the last few weeks. You know, we are partners with Union Sanitary District on a number of things, and they have very limited land in terms of availability to install solar. They have a small solar field here near their pump station in Warm Springs, but that's the only one that I'm aware of. And they are rebuilding their plant right now, making a huge investment over the next decade. And they could use some solar power too. And we have a ACWD, USD financial joint power authority in place. And maybe this is an opportunity to exercise that joint power authority to put in a solar installation at Patterson Reservoir, which feeds into the requirements of USD. I think we should open up the door with them, explore the opportunity, and don't dismiss that site, which is an extraordinary site for solar, especially the western slope, where you get premium sunlight potentially on solar panels. And the very last thing I would mention is I've always been intrigued by putting solar on water, where I see it happening in various parts of the state and country. And so I hope we will take a continued look on the installation of solar on Pit 1 and 2, where it's kind of obscured from public notice. But I still see that as quite an opportunity. So thank you for allowing me to make my remarks here.
Thank you,
I may
Director
add-
Sethi. Yeah,
I may add a
Director
couple
Wade.
remarks. There was no mention in the initial presentation of the private partner that we were going to have with this project. I assume they're still in place. Were the credits that were mentioned coming to the district, or were they going to the third-party private partner who's helping to be part of the investment?
Yeah, maybe I can just chime in real quick. We're just at the very beginning of this presentation. Ms. Ibagunta paused to make sure that there weren't any questions about the initial information that she shared. We do have more information about our prospective partnership with the solar developer, about the finances and so forth. So there'll be additional opportunity for the board to ask additional questions. So we hope to answer many of those as we go through the presentation. I did also want to address Director Sethi's suggestion. I think it's a good suggestion to confirm whether or not there are opportunities where we can work jointly with the Union Sanitary District. I do have a discussion coming up with the USD General Manager, and I'll bring that up as a topic of discussion. But we appreciate the initial feedback from the board. We do have more to present though.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fuzz.
Thank you. Could I have the next slide, please? Great. So I'll walk you all through the power purchase agreement procurement process. So in close coordination with the district and Hanson Bridget, we prepared a request for proposals and advertised that in July 2020. In response to that, we received 22 signed NDAs from 22 developers who were interested in accessing the RFP documents. Following that, we received 3 responsive proposals in September 2020 from the following developers listed in alphabetical order: NextEra Energy Resources, REC Solar, which is owned by Duke Energy and is now fully Duke Energy, and SunPower Corporation. Following the receipt of the proposals, we commenced evaluation of the various proposals based on the criteria that were outlined in the RFP itself. These included financial categories, contractual or contract exception categories, and experience and qualifications. The district also interviewed all 3 proposers before identifying NextEra as the highest ranked proposer in November 2020. Next slide, please. So a little bit about NextEra Energy, who's the entity that if the board approves this motion, will be entering into a power purchase agreement with the district. So they're a publicly traded company, they're Fortune 200. They're listed on the S&P 100 index. Obviously, they're a very large company. They own 46 gigawatts of generating capacity, including over 3.2 gigawatts of solar. They typically finance projects on their own balance sheet, so are not subject to outside investor requirements. They have both public and private installations and clients. They're also own Florida Power and Light Company, which is one of the larger electric utilities in the country with over 5.6 million customers. Next slide. So key PPA terms, and I think before we get into the PPA terms, it would be helpful to provide a brief overview of how a power purchase agreement works. It's definitely different from a typical construction contract. So a power purchase agreement is in essence a service agreement, where in this case, the district will be agreeing to purchase energy from NextEra at a set price for a specific term. All of the equipment is owned by NextEra, and they're responsible for all of the operations and maintenance of this equipment over the entire term. All the tax credits flow through to them. The district, as a public agency, is not able to monetize federal tax credits, which is why the district is partnering with NextEra on a power purchase agreement to basically capture the benefits of those tax credits and other tax incentives. There is a production guarantee that NextEra has to stand by. In this case, it's 90% of the expected production, and if the systems do not meet that guaranteed production, there'll be compensation that would make the district whole for that lost production. So in general, each site will have its own power purchase agreement with its own separate price and specifics and requirements based on the site. But the weighted average PPA price that the district would be agreeing to is 8.311 cents per kilowatt hour. The PPA has a 0% annual PPA price escalator, so that price would stay constant for the entire 25-year term. The initial term is 25 years, and there are several purchase options throughout that the district can exercise if they so choose to buy out the PPA. I mentioned the 90% production guarantee. There are something that's created when you have solar generation on site that's called Renewable Energy Certificates, or RECs. These have monetary value. These will flow to the district. And so if the district so chooses, you can monetize these credits by selling them on the open market. You may also choose to keep them for, if you would like to claim that you're offsetting certain amounts of carbon. And there are also multiple off-ramps available to the district in case the project does not proceed exactly as planned during the design phase. So there are exits available to the district. Next slide. So I'm talk a little bit about the project size and expected energy production. So I think I just want to clarify the project size is the capacity, right? So you get that based on the number of panels that are installed at each site. And then you have the expected production. Those units are in megawatt hours. And that's how much energy the system is expected to generate. And so that can vary based on site, based on solar access or solar resource, age of the system, orientation, tilt of the panels, shading impacts. So those are really the two units we're going to be looking at here. So the system size, phase 1 is 3.54 megawatts DC, that's direct current. Phase 2 is 2.2 megawatts DC, and the combined project would be 5.76 megawatts DC. So in terms of the expected production in year 1, phase 1 is expected to produce 6,200 megawatt hours, phase 2, 3,900 megawatt hours, for a total of 10,100 megawatt hours. Over the life of the initial term, which is 25 years, the expected production for phase 1 is 145,640 megawatt hours, 91,860 megawatt hours for phase 2, for a total combined output of 237,500 megawatt hours. That takes into account annual degradation of PV systems, which is about half a percent per year. And then when we look at the CO2 offset in year 1, phase 1 projects will offset 1,550 tons of CO2. Phase 2 would offset 1,020 for a total of 2,570 tons. Next slide, please. So some financial projections, and these are obviously projections, they're not guarantees. Year 1 savings, which reflects only savings from the phase 1 solar, since the phase 2 is a little bit further out, is $273,000. This is net savings, so this is after the operating costs, the PPA payments, and some internal operating costs. Over the initial 25-year term, the savings in nominal dollars are $20.92 million, and that's combined both phases of the project. And then when you look at the 25-year net present value, or NPV savings, using a 2% discount rate, you have savings of $15.56 million.
Do you have any reference to what the total is percentage-wise? What would be our total expenses in a year? We have 270.
I don't have that at hand right now. I'm sorry that I don't have
We
that
don't know if it's
information.
1% or 10% or 30%.
I believe it's closer to the 10% than the 1%, but I think we'd have to reference the total bill. Yep.
Yeah, Director Weed, maybe I can step in here. I believe we spend in total across all district functions upwards of $4 million a year in power costs. So this is getting, the 273,000 is probably, about 7% in year 1.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Next slide, please.
Can I ask why we're using such a low discount rate on the calculation there of 2%?
Sure. Yeah. So that's a discount rate that we'd worked with on staff during the initial feasibility assessments. Typically we use a relatively low discount rate for public projects because from my understanding, the district's not able to invest that money in in stocks or a corporation that might return a 10% discount rate. So we're basically trying to cover the costs of inflation here with that relatively low discount rate.
If you used a higher discount rate, let's say a 4%, what value are you creating on the other side of your ledger here?
It would decrease. I don't have that at my fingertips, but it would definitely decrease.
I would suggest it would be proportional, so 4% would be half these numbers.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be exactly proportional. I know we do typically use 3% for a lot of district net present value calculations. I know it's a figure we've used before. But I would say based on current market conditions, the current 30-year treasury note is currently, within about 0.1% of 2%. So I do think it's a reasonable number to use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. So this is a graphical presentation of the previous slide over the 25-year period. The x-axis is years. The columns represent the nominal savings at 20.92, and the darker blue line represents the NPV savings over time. Again, these are net and inclusive of operating costs. They do not, however, include the district's internal costs for this project, such as staff, legal, and consultant. These do reflect both phases of the project and a 3% annual utility escalation rate and a 0.5% annual solar PV production degradation.
Does the third party have the opportunity then to sell any surplus power to the grid?
No, so under the PPA, all of the energy that's produced by these systems is ACWD's.
Whether we can use it or not.
That's correct.
And I understand resale of PG&E power right now on the net surplus power is between 3 and 4 cents on average. And with the glut of power they have midday, almost nothing, potentially.
That's correct. And that was a key consideration in sizing these individual projects to provide significant buffer so that the district is not in the situation where you're paying for a high PPA rate and then needing to sell that energy at the net surplus compensation rate and operating at a net loss.
And if I could add, it's also a consideration as to whether or not we included other facilities, including, say, Patterson Reservoir, because if you get to a point where you're producing more than you're using under the RESBEC program, then that energy that excess energy you're producing is of virtually no value.
But a cost. Required cost, yes.
Correct.
May I just interject here that at times we may be producing excess power. And if you look at it one way, it goes unutilized and is wasted away. But on the other hand, we can look at that as capturable energy that we can store, in batteries and other electric forms here. So it's not like we have to throw that energy away. It can become a productive part of our total energy consumption outlook.
But at a yet to be identified capital cost.
Yeah, and maybe again, I'll just step in just to mention that we did include battery storage and a combined solar generation and battery system as part of our RFP process. And we did get responses back from the market on that combination. And I think in all cases, it didn't pencil out to include battery storage. But we also know that battery storage is becoming more and more economical over time. And we expect that at some point, it'll be something that we may want to strongly consider adding, in which case, yeah, Director Sethi, I think you're right. There is opportunities for additional generation in the future combined with battery storage, but economically, it hadn't penciled out yet.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Director Sethi, I'd also just like to provide a little bit more context on both the RES BCT and the net energy metering programs that these will be interconnected with under PG&E. So during times when the solar photovoltaic systems are generating more energy than the site is consuming, that exported power still has value based on the time of use value of that energy. And it's only on an annualized basis if the systems are generating more energy than can be used to offset that you would run into that problem where that energy loses the vast majority of its value. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
I'm going to, yeah, we've reached the end of this section. Are there further questions or comments on this section before I pass it off to Mr. Oneski?
I'd only note that my comment related earlier to the natural gas option was cost-wise break even, but actually advantageous since you don't have the risk of having surplus power that you're paying for. And you have 24/7. So that was one of, proceeding with this is one of the votes I truly regret. Thank you.
All right.
I'll pass it on to Mr. Oneski.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to now give us a look at ACWD's upcoming solar sites and then give a quick program status update. So this, what you're looking at now is Whitfield Reservoir, and it has the best potential for solar savings of our facilities because it has the largest surface area of any of our reservoirs, and there is a large power consumption on site from the Whitfield pump station. Offsetting power usually are used locally is more cost efficient than transmitting power generated to other sites. In contrast to other reservoirs, Whitfield has an earthen roof over a buried reservoir, so it will receive a ground mount solar array. Next slide. So the blue areas on the aerial image designate the location of the solar panels, the future solar panels. Solar panels over the reservoir, which is located on the left side, will have ballast supports. Solar panels over the rest of the field has the necessary depth to allow driven posts to support the elevated solar arrays. This site will receive a new perimeter fence inside of the landscaping. The other sites already have perimeter fences. Note that this and other aerial images of the solar installations in this presentation are conceptual drawings received in the proposal from the selected solar developer. As part of the implementation process, ACWD will work with the solar developer to determine the final equipment arrangement. However, we anticipate the layouts to be very close to what is shown here. Next slide. Solar at headquarters, we use the net energy metering PG&E rate structure to offset power use on site, which is primarily attributed to HVAC and lighting. Next slide. New canopies will be installed over the equipment storage racks and be outfitted with solar panels. The existing solar panels over the employee parking and material storage area are aging and will be replaced with new solar panels. Next. Reservoirs provide a lot of flat surface area and are not visible to much of the surrounding areas, which present a good solar opportunity for the district. Mayhew's is one of the reservoirs designated for solar. Because it does not consume much power on site, it will use the RESBECT PG&E rate plan. Solar generated on this site will be sold to PG&E and used to offset power consumed at other ACWD facilities, as noted earlier. Next. And here you can see the anticipated solar arrangement at the Mayhew Reservoir. Next slide. Alameda Reservoir is a site designated to receive solar during the phase 2 of implementation. The project was split into 2 phases to allow time for retrofit of the Alameda and Dakota Reservoir roofs before receiving the solar panel loads. Notice the mature trees around this site that provide shade along 2 of the sides of the roof. These large trees can cast shadows onto the reservoir roof. Next slide. And here's an aerial image of that same reservoir, and the solar panels are arranged to avoid those shaded areas along the bottom and right sides of the image. Next slide. Dakota Reservoir is the other site designated for the implementation during phase 2. Next slide. Here's an image a little further out from Dakota so you can see the immediate surroundings. Oh, wait a minute. I think that one got cut, but that's okay. So this is the solar panel arrangement plan for the Dakota Reservoir. And next slide. The Newark desalination facility is the only of ACWD's solar sites located outside of Fremont. The large sloped face of the roof you see here is a south facing with a few roof penetrations, making a good candidate for solar. Next slide. Here's the solar panels shown for the roof of the desal facility. Next slide. And the clean energy program has been in the process for several years. It started with the analysis to determine which clean sources of energy were most appropriate, including wind, solar, hydro storage, and yes, as mentioned earlier with Bloom Energy, we did assess fuel cell technology. I can't recall at this time why it did not make the cut and move on with the implementation process. I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. We then applied that technology to ACWD facilities to determine which of the best candidate sites. Systems were modeled to determine optimal sizes, rate structures, and financial feasibility, and proposals were received from the solar developers. The pricing and options were evaluated to determine the best path forward for ACWD. CEQA documentation has already been completed and accepted by the board in previous sessions, and we are finalizing the negotiations with the selected solar developer on the terms of the power purchase agreements. After the approval of the board tonight, the final forms of the PPAs will be circulated to be executed by both the solar developer and ACWD's general manager. And then implementation will begin with design submittals reviewed by ACWD, leading to construction in a few months. This is a multi-phase program, which we anticipate to be fully in operation by the end of 2024. And that's the end of my section. So I'm going to turn it over to Carlos Sampierre.
All right, thank you. So this program has a broader than usual impact for construction projects that we take on. So we'd like to give it a public presence with a single groundbreaking ceremony. That would most likely take place at Whitfield Reservoir, since it's the most open and most accessible of our sites. So look forward to that. We'll also have our typical local outreach before going into construction at each individual site. And that's our usual mailers and tent events, specifically to give information to the neighbors prior to bringing trucks and noise through their neighborhoods. One thing I'm looking forward to is the public web portal that we'll have set up to show what production looks like in real time at each site. That'll be available to everyone. Internally, we'll have additional information available to us, but the public web portal should be pretty neat. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, we have two related items on the agenda today. One, the bigger one, relates to the PPAs, but we're also recommending an amendment to Sage Renewable's professional services agreement. Sage has been invaluable during the procurement phase, as you can see here. They performed the feasibility analyses and life cycle modeling that resulted in the site selections that we just talked about. They managed the RFP process through which we have selected NextEra Energy, as we'll get into. And they've helped us in the very long negotiations with them. They've also worked with PG&E to prepare the sites for the electrical upgrades that are going to be necessary. Next slide, please. And now as we get into the implementation phase, there's They're going to be helping us review NextEra's designs, and that's one place where we may need additional help from Sage in regards to electrical and structural services. And then they'll provide support to us during construction, commissioning, and closeout. And they'll help us set up an asset management program for the lifetime of the panels. So very grateful to Sage and looking forward to their help during implementation. Next, please. So here's a look at the phase 1 schedule. Provided that we move ahead tonight, the plan is to spend the next 6 months in design, get into permitting starting in the winter, continuing through spring. And then our goal is to start construction in May so that we can finish all the construction at phase 1 sites by the end of next year. After that, we'll move into phase 2, and phase 2 is a little up in the air. It's going to depend on the RESBIC program and other factors, but if feasible, that would run for another 2 years, so taking us through 2024. Next slide, please. So based on that, we have our first staff recommendation, which is by motion to authorize the general manager to execute power purchase agreements for phase 1 at headquarters, Mayhew Reservoir, Newark Desalination Facility, and Whitfield Reservoir, with DG West 1, an indirect wholly owned subsidiary of NextEra Energy Resources, LLC and EER, and phase 2, Alameda Reservoir and Dakota Reservoir, with terms and conditions substantially similar to the attached Form PPA, and with the final Form PPAs acceptable to the General Manager and General Counsel for the Clean Energy Program, Job 10093. Next slide, please. Following that, we have the following staff recommendation for item 5.10. By motion, authorize the general manager to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Sage Renewables Energy Consulting in an amount not to exceed $179,500 for professional services in support of the Clean Energy Program, Job 10093. Sorry, do we take those one at a time? Okay. So any further questions? Be happy to take.
Okay, I'll open it up to the board for questions and comments.
Question, you mentioned there were off-ramps in one of your slides. What are the off-ramps? And is the project scalable? Can we delete portions of it that we've currently identified for installation if we find that it's either we don't have a use for the power there and we don't have to resell it back to the grid effectively?
Yeah, I think Mr. Fuss would be the right person to provide that detail. And you're muted at the moment, Elon.
Thank you. Yeah, so Director Weed, there are off-ramps during the design phase that are notice to proceeds to various stages of design. And those are off-ramps that are available during the design phase. After the projects are operational, there are also opportunities for the district to exercise early purchase options to buy out the system and gain ownership of each individual PV system at each site.
Okay. And we didn't have a slide showing what the cost of the buyout would be, but I assume it's projected to be a lump sum cost that would have a future value, the Enron approach to what the market value is in the long run.
That's correct. So each PPA has a termination payment for individual years, and the buyout is the greater of the termination payment or the fair market value, which is standard within power purchase agreement contracts.
This is Director Sethi. I have a couple of comments. First, I want to compliment the staff on the rigorous evaluation of the vendors who made a bid here for this opportunity and for the staff selection of an outstanding firm in Next Energy. And just to communicate this to the public and to the rest of our board, if you're not informed, Next Energy is the largest energy company in the country by market capitalization. It sounds like a startup company, but it is the largest energy company in America by market capitalization, and very well diversified and financially very strong. And the reason I mention this is because we have another board and council in the area that where their elected officials made very poor choices over the last decade and selected companies that gave the most aggressive bid, and they thought it was most cost effective. And then when we went into the recession in 2008, 2010, and then the more recent recession, what happened? They failed. And so you get people that make poor decisions, elected officials, and you pay for it in the end. And so I really want our public, our ratepayers, to recognize that we didn't go down that path. We have probably the most respected energy company in America that is backing us up on this rollout of solar in the area. So I'm very proud of our staff and how they went through the screening process, and also for Sage Consulting on all of the valuable advice that they offered here too. So thank you very much. And I will make the motion, since I started this process 3 years ago with some workshops, to make the motion to approve item 5.9.
Director Sethi, before we take that motion, I know Ms. Defranco from the city of Fremont did wish to make a comment as well, and I see her hand up, so maybe we'll give her a quick moment to speak.
Yeah, thank you. So I just
By
wanted
the way,
to.
Rachel, we have met in the chamber
Yes.
on the Government Affairs Committee, and I was not referring to the city of Fremont. Okay.
No worries. Yeah, so I'm the sustainability manager for the city of Fremont, and I just wanted to say that this project really aligns very closely with the city's climate action goals. We first passed the climate action plan in 2012 that had a goal of reducing emissions 25% community-wide by the year 2020. We have met that goal, and we're currently working on updating our climate action plan with the goal of achieving a 55% emission reduction by the year 2030 and carbon neutrality by the year 2045. The city itself has installed solar on 7 of our own facilities, 3 of which are microgrids at our fire stations. So I appreciate the discussion around battery backup. That project was funded through a California Energy Commission grant. So I recognize that the market cost of installing batteries on existing or new solar projects can still be questionable in terms of penciling financially. But we have definitely seen the benefit of having those battery backup systems at our fire stations as critical facilities. And so, I think that the approach that ACWD is taking in regards to keeping the possibility of future battery open and making sure that that's considered in the contracting process is really important, because we know that battery costs will continue to go down over the years, and there's more incentives becoming available from the state as well. The city itself has about 1.65 megawatts of solar installed across the 7 facilities. So this project would be about 3.5 times more solar than the city of Fremont's own installations. And as was mentioned in the presentations, there's about a little less than, at the end of 2020, there's a little less than 50 megawatts of installed solar capacity across the city of Fremont, and 21 megawatts of that was non-residential. So this project, again, would represent 10% of the total solar installed in Fremont, or over 20% of the non-residential solar that's been installed so far in Fremont. So it's a sizable amount of solar, and it really aligns with these larger goals that we have of the city in ensuring that our city is going to continually move toward clean energy, especially in support of public operations like our own and like the water districts. So again, I think this is a really amazing opportunity for the district in looking at the pricing and the terms. It seems extremely favorable, really great rate, and the fact that there's no escalation factor, over the years is definitely something to keep in mind, because in our own power purchase agreements with the city, we do have a moderate escalation factor for our system. So we are paying more annually for that energy generated than the year prior. So with all that said, I just want to commend the water district in getting to this point, and hope that the board of directors considers all of this in making their decision.
Thank you so much, Ms. Defranco.
This is Director Sethi again.
Yes.
I just want to build on that last point that Rachel was mentioning, that unfortunately, if you look around our Tri-City community and even more broadly, people have negotiated these escalation clauses into their agreements where the price of energy is going up over time, starting at a low base, but going up over the term of 20, 25 years that they're engaged with on their PPA contract. That is not good from a general economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, because you would expect over the term that the energy costs would be going down and things would be becoming more efficient. And just like she's saying, even the city of Fremont ended up with a contract where they have an escalation clause where the price is going up into the future. So again, compliments to our staff and to Sage Consulting on their advice to end up with an agreement where we have a zero escalation over the term of the contract. That is fantastic. That's something reportable out to all of our ratepayers. Very good job.
Do you want to wait for comments until a motion is on the floor?
I made the motion.
Yeah, and I also see that we have a hand raised from a member of the public, but Director Weed, you're up first.
Well, remember, let's get the input from the public before the board speaks. It's always helpful.
Okay, Mr. Nishimura, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a broad comment. I am in support of this project. From a financial perspective as well as an environmental perspective, it seems like a winner for the district. Being able to secure electricity for the district for a long period of time at roughly a little over 8 cents per kilowatt hour for the next 25 years seems to be a solid move for financial sustainability for the district. I know a director made a comment about solid oxide fuel cells as an alternative, and I think it really depends on what the objective of the project is. If the objective is to offset power purchased from the utility to save costs and also reduce one's carbon footprint as much as possible, using PV in this way seems to be the right approach. Solid oxide fuel cells are not zero carbon technology. They emit roughly 825 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour generated. And that's a figure I think that has been validated by AC Transit, which has introduced those or has installed those units. I do have a couple questions. One is the proposal includes this 90% production guarantee. I assume that should a panel fail or degrade, because if you look at the data sheet for these panels, the warranted performance at the end of the 25 or 30-year life is only 80%. So I assume that if any warranty failures or panels that degrade are the responsibility of the firm that's putting this in. It's not the district. So that's one question. The second question I have is one that maybe is obvious or hasn't been, or maybe hasn't been asked is, what is the probability that the district will have to disturb the roof of these reservoirs or disturb the ground of Whitfield for operational reasons? And if that were to happen, I assume the district would incur the cost of de-installing and reinstalling the units. I do recall that these reservoirs roofs were recently renovated in preparation for this, but what do you think is the probability of that? Thanks.
Well, maybe I'll just start by just addressing the second part first, and I'll ask Mr. Fuss to confirm the response on the first part, or staff to jump in too. But with regard to disturbing the reservoir roofs and so forth, there are 3 reservoirs, I guess, with structural roofs that are not, buried as part of the project. And the Mayhew Reservoir is part of phase 1, and that was designed to be able to take solar. And when the roof was originally designed and replaced a few years ago, the Alameda and Dakota reservoirs that are part of phase 2, that design will specifically include provisions to provide for solar to be installed. So we don't expect problems with regard to the reservoir roofs, but that certainly has been an area of key concern. We want to make sure that there are not problems with regard to how the panels are attached, the structural load bearing capacity of the roofs and so forth. So so that has been a key focus. We don't expect issues there. And I'll ask Mr. Fuss to address the first part of the question.
Thank you. Yeah, so the first part of the question was about whether if there's damage to equipment that's under warranty, who's responsible for it. And that is NextEra's responsibility during the term of the PPA. The degradation that you mentioned, which is 0.5% a year on average, that's accounted for in the production guarantee. So the expected production degrades by 0.5% per year over the term, as well as the guaranteed production. Now, if production degrades faster than that because you have faulty modules, that would be a warranty issue and under NextEra's obligation.
Thank you.
President Akbari, I made a motion. I didn't hear a second.
Yeah, I wanted to just make sure we got more comments, but is there a second on the table?
I'll go ahead and second. I do have some comments.
All right, I have some comments as well. Solar power is not an economically viable option within the industry or in the community at this time. We have not reached grid parity. The market value of solar is continuing to drop because of the glut of solar on the market. PG&E has been forced to raise it to a subsidized 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour. We're signing a contract for twice that. And it's going to continue to drop with the glut of solar coming on the market for a number of reasons. The reasons we're not doing it ourselves is that we cannot make it work, but we're using the private tax benefits that go to encourage solar by the government to a private entity next year. I commend the staff for working within the parameters we gave them and coming up with a much better deal than the city or some of the local entities have. I was on a community college board where we went with solar power on the campus, but understand the financial mechanism of the community college, where the pot of money that pays utilities also pays salary and benefits, and they get a lump sum from the state. So they don't care whether it's cost effective or not. If they can reduce the overall cost, it's more money for salaries and benefits. When we did the analysis, I don't recall any effort at all to look at natural gas. At my request, I asked for a cost estimate of what natural gas would be and was given a number 50% higher than I was told it was actually in the market. I don't believe it was in the mindset of the consultant we hired. So we can proceed down this path. It meets some social goals, but it's not an economically viable decision. It's not an economically rational decision. And if it makes you feel better, that's fine. But at the end of the day, the ratepayers are going to be paying a higher amount for what we're proposing to do. And there is risk. And there is also the burden of all of the additional facilities that we have to build, these solar panels, maintain what their impact is on our current facilities. Our fundamental goal is to operate 24/7. This doesn't do it. There are economically viable options which would give us that contingency approach. And I hope in our planning in the future, we can look at contingency planning at all of our CIP projects. It would turn this type of a project cold from day one. It doesn't pencil out. Thank you.
I just, if I may, just wanted to make a quick note that Director Weed was actually mentioning prior analyses that we had conducted along with a different consultant than Sage Energy. So that wasn't a comment about Sage Energy's assessment of our overall program. That was an assessment that was done as we prepared to scope out our overall program. And yes, fuel cells were evaluated at that time. I think, as I recall, we concluded through that assessment that while they were competitive, there was concern over escalation in the price of natural gas over time. And also some of the other boxes didn't get checked as well as solar. But again, there's nothing that we're doing here that precludes the use of other power generating approaches in the future. So I just wanted to make that quick note that Director Weed wasn't referring to Sage Energy.
And I would also note that about when we first looked at Bloom Energy, they had a business plan that was poorly devised. It may have helped some corporate entities, but it did not meet our requirements because of the way that they structured theirs. They would own the equipment and charge you with limits, with no limits on the escalation. That has been revised now within the fuel cell industry. Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. Many years ago, as a matter of fact, now, we had this brought to the board and split board didn't go forward. I supported it back then. I believe I also probably made the same comment I'm about to make now. And solar technology is not new. I had my first solar project as a cadet in 1980 at the United States Coast Guard Academy. Coast Guard's been using it since probably the late 70s. On the same thing, I had my first desal plant probably in 1985 as a lieutenant junior grade. So this technology that our staff is using and pursuing is not new. What is new right now, in particular, and has been brought up tonight, is the battery technology's gotten significantly better. The infrastructure around those solar projects has gotten better. And I'm thrilled to death that we're pushing ahead with this. Is it perfect? No. Could fuel cells be used on our property? Perhaps. I think it's always worthy to look at that. But it's not worthy to throw away the solar projects that we could use to save money to look further down the road for something else. We kicked that can down the road already. It's time to move forward. We're moving forward tonight. I fully support this. I supported it back then. Like I said before, is it perfect? No. Is it a gamble? Perhaps. Is there this glut of solar energy out there on the market? To be honest, I don't think so. Now, I have a rooftop system at my house. I put my money into it. Am I going to get my money back? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I do know my bill went down. So does it make power at night? No. I didn't invest in a battery. The battery didn't pencil out. The system on the roof did. Now, granted, yes, there were incentives to do that. But the fact is, we're not generating that power right now During the day, my home, we send it back to the grid. Do I get a great dollar for that? No, I don't. But somewhere, some power plant is not generating that power, whether it be nuclear, which I support completely, or diesel or natural gas or some carbon project. And by the way, wind, unless something happened since I was in school, that's not that great either. And yes, they're building wind plants. I hear about wind plants, the ocean and all this other stuff. There was an ocean tidal plant built years ago in Nova Scotia. It's ruins now from age and salt water, and this is not new technology. I commend the staff for this project. I think they've done their homework. I think we got a good deal, and I want to move forward. And I'm happy we're moving forward, which is why I seconded it. Thank you.
President Akbari, may I?
Yes, Director Wong.
So I think first of all, I just want to be very clear for members of the public that the board did not reach this point without a lot of consideration. There are quite a few workshops and public meetings along the way that allow us to review, evaluate, and narrow down our criteria. We are the one who set the criteria, and that leads us to this point. Staff did a great job to work on doing all the evaluations, and the evaluation shows that this project is financially beneficial to us in addition to the environmental impacts. This definitely makes sense for me, and I'm definitely supporting this project, these two agenda items. But I think that's one thing we should always also remember is that this is not be it and done, right? This is just a tool in the district's overall energy management plan. There are other options, and we'll constantly be evaluating different possibilities, right? We looked at solar many years ago, it came back again. Who's to say we will not be looking at fuel cells in a couple years, right? Staff will constantly look at possibilities, ways to save district money. So this is not the one-stop shop. This is just a tool, one of the tools in our overall portfolio, and we'll be looking at it. And I'm actually happy to hear that there are off-ramps. I do have concerns about equipment and what happens if we, for some reason, need to do emergency repairs in our reservoirs or tanks with panels on the top. Sounds like staff has considered all that possibility, and we're adequately covered. And if things doesn't pencil out during design, there are ways for us to walk away. So I'm actually personally very happy. Just want to say thank you to staff for doing all the evaluation and for so patiently bringing our customer and the directors along this road to help us understand all the decision criteria. Thank you.
Let me just one quick note. I would encourage board members to Google the term solar glut, and you'll find that California has inverted the energy curve, and we have an incredible glut. You can't give away the power in midday now. The same solar that we're obligated to pay 8 cents a kilowatt hour for. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. I'm also supportive of this project. I think staff has done a great job in presenting the business case here, and I'm quite happy about us moving forward here. My only request would be, I think this is a great story for us to tell to our community, both on the financial implications as well as the reduction in our carbon footprint. So I would request maybe putting out a press release or something of that sort, so that we can show this to our community and show the good work that we're doing. With that, I think we have a motion and a second. So I will ask our district secretary to take roll call, please.
Directors Weed,
No.
Gunther,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Duffy,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Great. So that concludes items 5.9 and 5.10. I am going to suggest that we take a quick.
President Akbari.
Yes, Director Sethi.
I made my motion on item 5.9.
Oh, my apologies.
I did not include 5.10.
Okay.
So I think we need to take that separately here. And if you
Yeah.
wish, I will make the motion to approve staff recommendation on item 5.10.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Directors Weed,
I'll abstain since I voted no on the first one. I do not object to the personalities involved in the project.
Gunther,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Thank you for catching that, Director Sethi. That concludes items 5.9 and 5.10. I'm going to suggest that we take a quick, maybe 10-minute break. I have 7:50 on the clock, so why don't we reconvene at 8 p.m. Okay, it is 8:03 and we're reconvening. We are taking item 6.1, board committee reports. Are there any questions or comments on any of the board committee reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6.2, operational reports. Are there any questions or comments on any of our operational reports?
I have some comments on item 6.2.6, annual total consumption report.
Yes, Director Sethi.
Okay, as I noted last month, and I'm going to re-mention it here, our community is not saving water during a time of drought. If you take a look at the chart in our board report, it's page 568. It's right near the end of the board packet on total consumption. You will see that we've actually been trending up over the last 3 years. Each year, year over year, we're going up on consumption for our residential usage. Non-residential is fairly flat. And as I noted to Mr. Stevenson yesterday, we are about 25% above where we were in fiscal year 15-16 with where we are right now. And we're well above 14-15 as well. This morning, the San Jose Mercury News had a detailed article about water usage by city across Santa Clara County. And in that county, they're not saving water. I'm on the Water Management Committee for Aqua, and the same report is coming through across the state of California. Californians are not saving water during a term of severe drought. And all the public messaging, the PSAs, everything are not enough right now without a mandate from the governor, like Governor Brown had done in the last drought. Yesterday, I participated in the BOSCA Board Policy Committee meeting in which Steve Ritchie gave the opening presentation from San Francisco as the Assistant General Manager up there. And San Luis Reservoir, which I saw just 3 years ago, completely full, almost, I think it was like 4 to 6 feet below the level of the top of the dam, is now down to 14%. 14%. We're almost getting down to the dead pool in San Luis Reservoir. Mr. Ash, Leonard Ash, was part of the meeting yesterday too, so he heard all this same data. Lake Oroville's down to 23%. Lake Shasta's down to about the same. Most of the Southern California reservoirs are down in the low 20% range. The only reservoirs that have at least a decent level of water are Maloney's Dam and Hetch Hetchy. But even Hetch Hetchy at 68% right now is well below the normal for a year. I expect with the new rainfall year, October 1, and hopefully we get the recall behind us here, where the governor can start acting in a responsible manner. And I said this to his deputy staff member at the Chamber of Commerce meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, that the governor needs to put in force a mandatory reduction of water. And as we go into the rate process here of where we're considering raising rates, I want the board and the community just to factor in a couple of things. That we may have a compound effect here where we're raising rates, we're replacing our system with new AMI equipment, which is going to result in customers having higher consumption reports on their water bill. And we may, in fact, have to go back to staged rates to deal with this drought if we could enter into a third-year drought. And the multiplier effect of doing all of these things at the same time is likely to result in a boardroom or a Zoom meeting like we had last time, where the boardroom is filled with outrageous customers. So I'm trying to look ahead right now, and I think that it's incumbent upon us to, as effectively as possible, get the word out to the community. We're just not doing a good enough job as an entire water industry right now. So I will leave my comments at that, and also note that even on our water production report, we were running ahead in April and May. We're slightly below in the summertime, but I view this as due entirely to having a fairly cool summer. We have not had a hot summer like we normally do. So when you see that ACWD customers are increasing their water consumption 3 years in a row, it means that the messaging is simply not getting out there. And it requires board leadership on all of our parts to help get the word out. Thank you.
Well, if I might follow on with Director Sethi's comments. San Francisco has the benefit of having 6 to 7 years of water storage in their current local system. So they can go away a while without running into a water crisis. They monitored it. They also, in the Steve Ritchie report, was a discussion of Los Vaqueros, where they're counting on no additional water supply. We're showing 1,600 acre feet for almost $100 million. And they're relying on desalination of the estuary as being their future water, which is something we may want to look into. So Antioch is spending $60 million on estuary desal. But we do have an option which we've not utilized, and that is Del Valle Reservoir. It came up the other day in our water quality report on our inability to meet our own water quality standards at times during the summer months when we have large algae hits coming out of the Delta. One of those solutions is to look to Del Valle for water supply if it's there. Unfortunately, DWR is working under some archaic rules, which are not allowing us to park semi-tropic water there, nor normal additional flows from the, including Article 21 water out of the state water system. That is purely arbitrary bureaucratic rules. There's nothing legally restrictive on them as long as we don't go above the 40,000 foot elevation. We have a partial solution at hand if we can get DWR and our own staff to push it. We can get and make a minor adjustment to the intake of their water treatment facility. The 9,000 acre feet of water supply we got out of Del Valle in 2017 should be our annual water supply from Del Valle. It's simple things to do at no major capital cost. We haven't done it. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I see a hand raised from a member of the public, Mr. Nishimura.
Once again, I'm going to beat Director Gunther in commending the district on their water hardness. I am looking at the map and I see that you have met your target goal of 150 milligrams per liter or less, I think, across the entire district. So kudos to the district for making that happen again. Following on to Director Sethi's comment about the chart on, I believe it was page 568 of the packet. And this is sort of going back to maybe the discussion earlier in the meeting about the water supply assessment is, and Director Sethi's comment that 955 acre feet is significant. So, he made the comment that we are increasing our consumption between 18, 19 and 21, 20 and 21. How much of that increase is attributable to new construction? And if you take out the expected increase due to new construction, if you look at it sort of on a per capita or a per residence basis, are the residents actually using more water, or is that increase just due to growth?
If I may reply there quickly here, and I'll leave it to the staff. There is another chart at the back of the packet on the number of water connections, which I also looked at. So that chart shows just a very slight increase over the last 3 years, not anywhere near the increase in water consumption. So yes, we have had added connections, but not anywhere near the percentage rise in consumption.
Yeah, and I can also, I think, echo what Director Sethi is suggesting, that very little of the increase is as a result of new development. And not only have we not added that many new connections, but generally the new development demands are much lower than existing development on a per capita per unit basis. But I invite our manager or director of water resources to add any further comments, if appropriate.
No, I was trying to do some quick math, but I'm not successful in pulling that off here, Mr. Stevenson. So, and I don't recall the per capita numbers off the top of my head right now. But I think you're correct that we're not seeing a huge increase overall due to the development.
Yeah, I think our assessment is that this is generally just the elastic part of essentially rebound from the last drought, as we've had some wet years and folks have taken advantage of plentiful water, and now of course that's not the case these days. And so messaging right now about trying to conserve has been a big part of what we've been up to, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that under GM reports.
Any other, excuse me, any other comments on item 6.2? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6.3. I don't believe we have any staff presentations today. Looking at staff.
That's correct, President Akbari.
Great, so then we can move on to item 6.4.1, update on the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'll turn it to Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, President Akbari, and I'll try and keep these remarks brief, but there's an awful lot going on with regard to COVID, and I just want to bring the board up to speed with regard to some of the things that are happening here at the district. First of all, we continue to strongly recommend that all of our employees become vaccinated. As of right now, we're about 75% vaccinated. We've had a total of 25 positive COVID cases among staff since the very beginning of the pandemic back in March of 2020. But 8 of those have occurred over the last couple of months since July, since the beginning of July. So, the prevalence of the Delta variant has been an issue of late, and it's factoring into our planning as we're moving forward. So part of that planning moving forward includes the program that I described last month of requiring weekly COVID testing for all of our staff who are not yet vaccinated. So this testing program, that'll begin on September 20. With regard to general mandatory re-officing of all of the staff that are currently working remotely. At this point, we're planning to delay the mandatory general reofficing date that I had mentioned previously as October 4, and wait until things settle down a bit with regard to both COVID conditions and also schools, and how they're able to handle the COVID pandemic in schools. So this may result in the general reofficing date being pushed out to perhaps even after the first of the year. But our intention remains to provide as much advance notice as possible to staff that are working remotely so that they can plan for that transition, which will be significant. However, that said, we are planning to reopen our lobby and our customer counter to our customers on Monday, October 4. And that's consistent with our plans to begin outreach to customers who have overdue water bills. And there are, as our Director of Finance, Jonathan Wunderlich, pointed out at our last workshop, we have a number of customers in that situation. And we want to be able to provide anybody who would like to meet us in person and discuss payment arrangements or pay bills in person to have that ability. So we're opening up our customer counter on October 4. And it's also consistent with our increasing messaging and outreach related to the drought, so that we have folks available for people to talk to in person if that's what they prefer. Also, it affords an opportunity for folks to talk to us about enrolling in the Help on Tap program, which is important too, as we're in the rates process right now. So, but just as a quick reminder, we are planning to initially open our lobby and customer counter hours from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So a little bit of a reduction in total hours that we'd have our counter open. And that's so that we can make sure that we're taking care of all of our in-person staffing needs during the day. So with regard to returning to in-person board meetings and committee meetings, it's a little bit up in the air right now. We are planning to resume public meetings in person the week of October 4, with the Operations and Water Quality Committee on October 5, the LICA Committee on October 12, and our October regular board meeting on October 14. So again, these are being planned as in-person public meetings with an option for the public to participate virtually. And they would be noticed as such. Now, that said, there has still been no sign from the governor that the exemptions to the Brown Act may be extended. We've been carefully monitoring that. There have been no signs yet. So one of the reasons why we're continuing to plan for in-person board meetings. However, there are bills in the legislature right now that would provide some flexibility with regard to continuing virtual public meetings, board meetings, and committee meetings, if certain conditions exist. AB 361 is right now, it's expected to pass and move to the governor, who would have until October 10 to sign it. And if this happens with enough lead time prior to the October public meetings, we would inform the board and make sure that we have clearly communicated the process that would be involved in both the board and the public. However, I'm still recommending that the board be prepared and plan to be present for all of the meetings in October, just in case. The timing here looks like it might be down to a day or so. And so to be careful, I think, again, the board should be planning to return to in-person public meetings in October. First of all, any questions on that information related to COVID? Okay, so our next GM report will be provided by our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen here shortly. Let's see. Hopefully you can see this. Is that showing up the slideshow or the notes?
Slideshow looks good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to provide just a very brief drought update tonight with a promise to return with more next month. We just wanted to get the board up to date with plans for 2022, which is really what we've got our eyes on right now. Warmer and drier conditions are forecasted. The National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center is forecasting likely El Nino conditions. There's a 70 to 80% chance of that happening during the winter and having it develop over the next couple of months, and can be continuing to point toward dry conditions. State water project conditions are at an all-time low. You've probably seen in the media, and as Director Sethi mentioned, forecasts this summer have predicted lower end-of-year storage levels with each monthly update that we've received. And as a reminder, 2021 also saw the lowest annual maximum storage levels ever at Lake Oroville. So 2021 will have Oroville's lowest high and lowest low storage levels. The photo here shows the Hyatt power plant intake structure at Lake Oroville, which no longer is in service due to low water levels. So all indications really do point to 2022 being a third dry year. So as I mentioned, we're very focused on planning for 2022. We've taken a number of different actions. We've really optimized district water resources to the best of our ability with all that we've got. Just a few highlights there on the state water project end. We've stored this year's allotment of our table A water from the state water project to be able to use for next year. And our semi-tropic water bank has been performing very well. We are delivering our full contract amount of pump back water this year. DWR has also been coordinating very closely with us and excuse me, routinely on our deliveries for this year, and they continue to confirm we're going to receive our 5% allocation. And we're in regular contact on planning for 2022 on the South Bay Aqueduct operations as well. They understand we're at the top end of the system here with some special logistics, so they're working very closely with us. They've also ensured that Del Val has remained as full as possible so it can be made available for SBA deliveries, South Bay Aqueduct deliveries next year. And they're also including or planning ahead for 2022 in looking at forecasts for next year and what actions they might take to ensure the best possibility for deliveries next year. Additional preparations here at the district include working on a draft drought ordinance, which is still a work in progress, but would be ready for the board to consider in the event that we need to implement mandatory water restrictions. Our water conservation programs are also being expanded, and we're ramping up with additional enhanced public messaging, including some geo-targeted online advertising that we're planning, and also other efforts to reach customers in multiple ways about the drought and the need to conserve. So, and you'll see the Folsom Lake here also looking very low. So on the demand front, what our customers are doing, we've been watching this closely. This monthly demands graph may look similar to the graph we've been providing in the past, but we've now removed the 2013 and 2015 demand lines so we can really focus on the current situation. So to orient you, the orange line with circles shows the 2020 pattern of monthly water demands, and the red line with the diamonds shows the 2021 monthly water demands through September 1st. We've also added a new line that you can see in purple dashes with squares to show what demands would be if we met the governor's executive order calling for 15% voluntary reduction from 2020 demands. While this new line may seem low, it is good to know that the 2015 actual demands were actually less than this demand pattern that you see for the 15% reduction. I'll also note that although we're seeing less water use than last year, in taking a detailed look at the data, which we have been taking a very detailed look at this, sorting out the patterns and whatnot. And we think that much of it can be attributed to the cooler weather and some pandemic related factors. You know, people have been going back to work, that sort of thing. Well, we have had over the last year and a half, a lot of our residents staying at home. So things are in flux. But we do see that we may be starting to see some reduction specifically attributable to customer changes. So this is something we're going to keep really close track of over the coming months. And we also continue continue to see increased interest in customer water conservation through a lot of inquiries on our programs, calls and emails to our hotline, and water waste reports. So this is just a graphic showing the pre-drought and July and August increase in activity on that front. And last but not least, next steps, there's a lot to continue to monitor the conditions happening and predicted for 2022 and our various supplies that we're keeping a close eye on. And one of the things we're really watching closely is the state actions and what the governor may do and what other actions the state may take in response to the drought. So we'll be closely watching that. And October 1st, as a reminder, is the start of the new water year. So that's, sort of a time frame when we will really start looking at 2022 and what may come ahead. So we'll be continuing with our monthly committee updates as usual, and we are planning to come back in October with a regular board meeting update. So I'm happy to answer any questions you've got. We were trying to keep it brief this morning or this evening with promise to come back next month.
John Weed, a suggestion that we also look at the groundwater reservoir at Niles Cone and compare it to what happened in 2015 when we had drained it to work on fish ladders. So we're in much better shape as far as the Niles Cone is concerned. And that I think would be a positive thing to show in our slides and projections.
Great. We definitely plan to include that next week or next month in our comprehensive update.
I have a couple of comments here. On the groundwater situation, as I noted last month, Director Weed is correct. We are in much better shape than at the bottom of the last drought because of work we were doing in the Alameda Creek Channel. But we're still below our target levels for the groundwater system. And hopefully we can replenish that groundwater system over the winter. I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I feel like we've been through this scenario before and in further years back before I was on the board. But we knew we were going into a drought in 2013, and we were using about 14,500 cubic feet of water residentially. And we were able to get that down to about 9,500 by the bottom of the drought in 15-16. That was about a 40% drop in residential consumption. Our commercial, industrial, institutional levels went from 6,000 down to about 5,000. So we were able to generate during that 4-year period of time from 2012-13 to 2015-16 a substantial reduction in water usage. And Governor Brown's mandate was to try and achieve a 25% mandatory reduction. We exceeded those reduction levels. And here the governor has asked for voluntary conservation of 15%. So what your slide does not show on slide 4 is what this 3-year trend has been of increasing consumption on the part of our residential customers, fairly flat on CII, but 15% may look good on that chart, but it doesn't show you the depth of what we actually went through in the last drought. It might be helpful to have a further line drawn in on slide 4, which indicates what a 25% reduction would look like, or a line that shows what would be comparable to the consumption levels that we were able to achieve in 2015-16. Clearly, and I say this not to point any blame to anybody on our board, this is an industry-wide issue that we're dealing with, and it starts in the governor's office. So I think we have to anticipate, come the new rainfall year, October 1, that there are going to be mandatory restrictions that we are going to have to meet. We need to prepare for it. It may be in excess of 15% because of the low reservoir situations right now. And with an El Nino forecast for the next year, it doesn't look like things are going to get much better. I don't want to paint a dire picture for the community, but 40% of our water supply comes from Lake Oroville. We've been dealing with getting 5% of that 40% this year. And it looks like it's going to be 5% of 40% next year. At some point, you start to break the bank on what's sustainable for not only our community, but communities across the board.
Director Gunther, I'd like to tag on to Director Sethi's comments. I think, yeah, the messaging, we need to go lower. I suspect we will have, the governor most likely, latest polling, will probably survive the recall. Based on that, his survival will have a mandatory message before the end of the month. So I think we probably should just plan on going that direction. We should probably anyway, but I suspect we're going to see it as soon as the recall's over. It's coming. It's only a question of how many days after the vote is finally tallied and what the magnitude is. It may be as much as Governor Brown's. I'm not surprised politically, he hasn't come out with it yet, but I envision we'll have it within a week after the election results.
Well, you know, if I might, there have been several lessons learned over the past. We've gone through this several times now with droughts. One, we should expect and can anticipate, I believe, a 20% plus cutback on the part of our water users. We saw that in the last drought. It's not a function of tiered rates or cost or financing. It's a matter of just public perception, and people will do that. Second, our drought lasted 4 months last time. That's when they went to a 0% allocation, and we could not do water transfers. As an urban district, we can pay 100 times more than the agricultural users who are using 4 to 5 times more water than the municipal industrial complex. And and it's a little bit easier. Our finances are in better shape this time than they were last time. We went into a real financial panic and we had to do a drought surcharge. We made the argument that it would for San Francisco water, but that went away. That was one of the things we can expect again, is that San Francisco will waive its requirement for minimum purchases and will actually save money on San Francisco water in their drought. So we've got some lessons, but overall we've learned we can do it. But we went with some of the parallels of last time. We had a great holiday prior to the last drought. We had a rate holiday prior to this drought. We have staged rates now, which are not related to conservation, but the need to get more additional revenues when people stop buying water, because we're leveraged when we sell water. Last several years, we've been putting about $50 million a year in the bank because we sell the water for almost 1.5 times more than it cost us. And we bank that money. So going into this drought, we're in a much better financial position. We're going to see that same leverage to the downside financially when we go into a drought. And hopefully we'll learn someday, after enough experiences, to get a responsible rate structure. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item?
Okay, President Akbari, if there are no other questions or comments on this item, I had one last item under GM reports, and that is that President Akbari, our Director of Water Resources, Laura Heides, and I are planning to participate in a presentation to the League of Women Voters. And I see I see who was here a moment ago. Oh yeah, Gail Tupper here this evening. The League of Women Voters has asked us to discuss a number of water topics, of course, importantly, including the drought. And so we'll be meeting with the League on Tuesday, September 28th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And so I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. I believe once some additional information comes out, we can forward it to the board to participate or join watching if interested. So that completes our GM reports for this evening.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And if we can get the agenda back, we are on item 7.1. We'll just take all of item 7 and whichever director would like to start us off. I'm seeing Director Weed at the top, so why don't I pick you?
Okay, so we had 2 events. Let me go to the California Special Districts Conference, which is in Monterey, our first in-person conference in some time. It was good to see people and be able to talk on the side about a number of the issues. I know we've been looking, and so of the issues that occurred at the conference, the subject matter of the Special District Association conferences are a little more general than, far more general than those at Aqua. There were some interesting concepts on the ability to get voter approved tax increments. There was also some discussion on being able to put, limited discussion on putting water bills and collection of water bills on the property tax. I found it interesting that, and there's another side discussion over the phone with the finance director at East Bay Mud, that they had been, since for the last 13 years, had been collecting past due bills on multi-tenant accounts by putting the entirety of the service charge and the commodity charge on the property tax bill, but they also put a lien. So they went back to find out why they put a lien on. And it turns out in 2008, when they started this, we had a financial crisis. And some members of someone in the people in their organization were worried about foreclosures. And that there was a foreclosure, that they would be left out in the cold. So they have spent an extraordinary amount of money in the interim, following a pattern, putting a individual separate lien on these water users. Not needed. I think they realize that as well. So I'm encouraged that there's some thought about the process, and hopefully we'll come up with something. Zooming through California, develops in the regional water management. More and more emphasis on stormwater capture, which strikes me that there's a watershed that would be ideal for that. So thank you.
Director Gunther, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess I can go on the zooming through California. I had to go in and out of that meeting. But I did notice that it appears that, we're really far ahead. And with aqua, replenishment, what we've been doing for years, and it's pleasing to see that, and it's pleasing to see other districts coming on. Kind of go, this is not new. It's stuff we have to do, and we've been doing it. And I think we're a shining star to everybody that is pursuing it today.
Are you done?
Director Gunther, you're on mute.
Yeah. Was I on mute the whole time?
No, I wasn't sure if you completed your comments.
No, I'm finished up. Yeah, it was pleasing to see the other agencies doing things we do.
Okay, here. This zooming through California was really our Aqua Region 5 meeting. We've been going through 4 different regions, either an individual region or combined regions. So this one just happened to be our Region 5 meeting. And we had 2 very interesting presentations. One was from the Pajaro Valley Water District, just south of Santa Cruz, on their watershed and how they're trying to capture water and generate new water sources. The one thing that was missing from the presentation, and I just happened to have a chance to talk to somebody while we were at the CSDA meeting following, that they have the perfect opportunity to put in a brackish water desal plant, just like we have right here in our service area. But they don't have the financial wherewithal as a water district in a farming community to be able to put that together. So they're looking at federal and state grants to perhaps put in something like that in the future. But overall, a very interesting presentation in terms of all the creativity that they're going through. And the presentation was by a board member who was the longtime general manager of the water district. And I just thought she gave a really good comprehensive presentation on her community. The second presentation was very intriguing, and it was on something new to the water industry, which is the water futures market, which is now has an active NASDAQ trading symbol with a futures market that is now in the development stages the last couple of years. And I have read about this from time to time, but I didn't realize all of the progress that has been made on buying and selling water futures on this new NASDAQ commodity exchange. I found the examples of how it is being used in the agricultural industry in California to be really insightful. And I'm glad to see that there is progress on that and that people are able to use the futures market to mitigate future risks on the price of water for whatever purpose they're using it for, orchards or crops, in the ground crops. I did ask some questions about the practicality of this for urban water districts, because one of the proponents was from Eastern Municipal Water District, who gave a good portion of the presentation. And I haven't had a chance to do so yet, but I'm going to follow up with that gentleman to find out how Eastern Municipal is using the futures market as an urban water district. And for John Wunderlich, I will try to pass on some of the information that I have already collected. Again, I don't know if it has any practical application in our water district, but it was exciting to see how this is being used in the agricultural industry. So on the Special Districts, California Special Districts Association annual meeting, I tried to put my focus, there are a lot of interesting sessions, but I tried to put my focus on emergency preparedness for the district in different ways. And so among those, I want to highlight the ones I attended. Public contracting requirements, emergency preparedness, and federal and state reimbursement. This was taught by an attorney from Myers Nave. Excellent presentation on all of the public contracts that need to be put in place ahead of an emergency. And I went over this in a meeting with Mr. Stevenson yesterday, so I don't want to belabor the point here. But there are at least 24 contracts that he highlighted that need to be put in place ahead of a major disaster, let's say an earthquake on the Hayward Fault. And that these are renewed by the board every year periodically, so that you can allow them to go into effect just by pulling the trigger. And we don't have anything like that in place right now. So along with one of the other sessions, I suggested to Mr. Stevenson that we have a couple of workshops where we focus entirely on our emergency preparedness for a major event. One of the things that he highlighted was all of the supplies that you need to put into stock in various areas around your service district. And he went into real detail about what has to go into that supply stock. And it's a relatively inexpensive investment when you think about the fact that you will not be able to get any of these things in the early days of an emergency. Parallel to that session, I attended the Building Disaster Resilience through FEMA programs, and I gave a couple of contacts to Mr. Stevenson, including the lady who heads up the Emergency Management Agency right up here in Oakland. And what was really interesting about this session, and I ended up missing lunch because I ended up talking to her and a couple other people all the way after this presentation, was all of the grant opportunities that are available for building pre-disaster resilience into your community. And so she was highlighting a lot of examples of where people are bypassing the bond market and going straight to the FEMA BRIC program, where they are doing major projects. So for example, on the Hayward Fault, we did less than something like 17 large diameter pipelines under our seismic program and retrofitting those. But we have more than 100 other pipelines across the Hayward Fault. We could package all of those pipelines into one bid, a grant bid, where we outlook getting the work done over 3-4 years. And instead of going to the bond market, this is government money that will help us build resilience into our service area. And she was saying it's so silly for people to go to the bond market and go into debt when the government is willing to pay to get these things done in your community. So I want to put that in as part of our workshop that we have. And the window for the new grant cycle is just opening up. It was $500 million a year just a few years back. It went up to $1 billion a year, and now President Biden has increased it to $1.5 billion a year of funding. Very exciting opportunities, and between the end of September and the end of the year, we have the opportunity to bid on these opportunities if we can package together some things. So I found that very practical as something we can do right away. I also attended the Energy Resilience for Critical Infrastructure. It goes into some of the things that we were talking about earlier here, where you are hardening up your local grid for your agency. And so this was going into a lot of detail. For example, we have all these pump stations that don't have backup power. How do you provide the power? What is the proper type of backup power? And going through every physical element of your plant for providing energy resilience. And so I think we'll get more into that as we get into this solar implementation. And that's why I said this is just the beginning of a long-term effort to try and build in a zero carbon footprint. And lastly, I attended one other session which was very interesting, the Dead Gift Away, the constitutional prohibition on gifts of public funds. And this was a very interesting presentation by two attorneys on what is permissible and what is not. Half the presentation dealt with public officials and getting into trouble. The other was on what agencies are allowed to do, and Director Weed attended that session as well. And we specifically asked the question from a number of different directions, with other people asking the same thing and giving examples of putting a zero-tier rate into effect in their district and how that qualifies as not a giveaway of public funds. And so they went through the rationale for providing the legal foundation for being able to put into effect a zero rate in your community. I'll leave that for a future rate discussion. Lastly, I want to bring up something. We had a presentation by Homeland Security that was an unclassified presentation, not for the general public, specifically geared toward a select pre-approved audience that had been cleared for this presentation. We had about 500 people at the conference. Close to 20% of the attendees attended this one session. It was by far the most attended session on the physical and cybersecurity in critical infrastructure. And I discussed this with Mr. Stevenson yesterday because it is of a real private nature, and we were requested not to speak on these issues in a public meeting. So I only want to describe that I attended that meeting and what actions our district can take to put in place procedures and policies that will allow us to be more cyber resilient. And there were specific recommendations that were made in that session, which I provided to Mr. Stevenson. So hopefully we will get a start on some of that, and the board, maybe in a closed door session, can discuss some of these efforts that Mr. Stevenson will initiate with our staff. So all in all, I thought it was a really good conference. I had not been to a California Special Districts Association meeting in quite some time. And I felt like I brought back a good return on investment for our ratepayers in attending this conference. I have two additional short reports. One is from the Alameda County Special Districts Association meeting that Director Whedon and I attended yesterday. And also in that session, there was one of our two presentations went into real detail about cybersecurity. And this presentation was given by the gentleman who's heading up these efforts for the city of Livermore. He was hired by Livermore a year ago after they had a huge ransomware attack, and he was working for an auditor agency that audited agencies for their level of resilience to cybersecurity or ransomware attacks. And we had a little bit of a report from East Bay Mud on things that they have done over the last dozen years in going through an audit of their own agency, which I encourage that we do as well. And lastly, on the same day as the Region 5 meeting, which was in the morning, I had to attend the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority meeting right afterward. And that was actually a rather lengthy meeting because of the closed door session, which is dealing with all of these legal issues that are being fought in the courts right now. And so hopefully, I think what I'm going to do here is communicate these things to our senior staff and to Mr. Miyake, and it may be appropriate at some time to talk about this in a closed door session, just like we're talking about it in closed door at the Finance Authority. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that was informative.
Thank you for all those comments. Are there any other directors' comments at this point? Hearing none, we will move on to our closed session items. And I will read us out into closed session, starting with item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code, section 54956.9D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case. After that, we'll take item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code, section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated negotiators are Ed Stevenson, Jennifer Solito, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Stacy Q, and the employee organization is the Operating Engineers Local 3. After that, we'll take item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code, section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. The agency designated negotiators are Ed Stevenson and Jennifer Solito, and the unrepresented employees are the management confidential professional employees. And with that, I will ask our district secretary to move us into closed session, please.
Hey, John, is it too late?
All right, it is 9:48 p.m. and the board is reconvening in open session. We have concluded item 8.1 pursuant to California Government Code, section 54956.9D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case. No action was taken on this item. On item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code, section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, the agency designated negotiators were Ed Stevenson, Jennifer Solito, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Stacy Q, and the employee organization was the Operating Engineers Local 3, and the board received a report from the labor negotiators. On item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code, section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, the agency designated negotiators were Ed Stevenson and Jennifer Solito, and the unrepresented employees were the management confidential professional employees, and the board received a report from the labor negotiators. With that, we'll move to item 9.1, consideration of amendments to the Management Confidential Professional Employees Compensation Schedule and Handbook. And I will turn it to our Director of HR, Jennifer Solito.
Thank you, President Akbari. Item 9.1 is a consideration of amendments for our Management Confidential and Professional, which I'll be referring to as MCP Employees Compensation Schedule and Benefits. As background, on June 10th, 2021, the board approved amendments to the health benefit structure for the MCP unrepresented classifications. Specifically, the amount of taxable health benefit compensation that employees may receive through the district's existing cafeteria plan, known as the Flex Dollars, was capped at 75% of the dual health benefit that employees receive for waiving district provided coverage. On July 11th, 2021, the board adopted updated terms and conditions of employment with the ACWD Operators Association Union, implementing various amendments, including similar but not identical changes to the health benefit structure for association represented positions. For association represented positions, the same cap on flex dollars received as taxable compensation was implemented. However, the dual coverage benefit received a one-time adjustment starting with calendar year 2022. In order to maintain equity across employee groups related to health benefits and in keeping with past practice, staff recommends that the dual health coverage benefit for MCP receive a one-time adjustment and the associated flex dollar cap dollars be adjusted accordingly as well to match the operator association health benefits. The district is still in negotiation with its other bargaining unit, the operating engineers local number 3. So the amendments proposed before your board tonight are to amend the MCP employee compensation schedule as follows. For active employee medical benefits effective with benefit plan year 2022, the dual coverage benefit receives a one-time adjustment to 50% of the current calendar year 2021 Kaiser rates, resulting in a new benefit amounts of, for employee only, $406.82, for employee plus one dependent, $813.64, and for employee plus family, $1,057.73. Effective for benefit plan year 2022, employees who enroll in health coverage and select a plan with a premium lower than the flex dollar allowance, which remains unchanged, will receive the remainder as compensation capped at 75% of the corresponding eligible dual coverage benefit. The corresponding maximum are as follows. For employee only, $305.11. For employee plus one dependent, $610.23. And for employee plus family, $793.30. The recommendation before your board tonight is to amend the MCP compensation schedule as just described, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, are there any questions or comments from members of the public? If not, I will open it up to see if we have a motion on the table.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi. Director Sethi. And Aquari.
Aye. Sorry, did we get a vote from Director Sethi?
I didn't hear him and I saw him on mute.
I thought it looks like we lost him.
Yeah,
Oh,
I will ask staff, should we wait or do we take it?
well,
As
I think
voted.
I heard 4 votes.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think he responded. I don't know if Gina heard it, but I did not hear it. So I think we need to report him as being abstained unless we wait and he comes back and actually records his vote.
I think
Okay.
Or absent, not abstained,
Yeah,
absent.
absent.
unless anyone's opposed, I think that's an okay way to move forward.
I think that's fine. I can give him a call if you'd like.
Yeah. If you could, I have one quick comment to make.
Quick calls,
We don't-
Okay.
we don't have in next week, I plan to attend a Smart Water Summit in Jacksonville, Florida, which is paid for by the industry. So there'll be no cost to the district. They sent out, being in Jacksonville, Florida, they just sent out a notice saying they're looking for additional people to participate in that if there are those that are interested. It is 3 days of getting one sales pitch after another from various water industry representatives. And but it's water. And so I'm sure I'll have those 5 days, including travel, in addition to the 10 days I'll be doing for other services. So it's not an economic issue from the standpoint of the district at all. But if someone is interested, I'm flying out on Saturday, the 18th, returning Wednesday, the 22nd. And even their fare is covered. $400 stipend per airfare, which covers the cost of a round trip to Florida right now. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. And I take that that was part of your director's comments. So
I didn't see director's comments on our agenda. That's what I was wondering.
it was item 7, but not to worry.
Okay,
That was noted.
prior to this, okay. I was slipping it in after the.
I
Mr.
was not
Stevenson, did
able to
we?
reach him. He didn't pick up the phone. So I would say we move on and count him as absent.
Okay. So in that case, we've completed item 9.1. And at 9:56 p.m., we will conclude today's board meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.